we take a moment just to read our statement. We are just going to try to read the statement every time just to kind of let everybody know if you're new to our group, Real Talk, Real Truth. We want you to know what we're here for, what we're about, and then we'll get into our topic. So as Christians, we are instructed to test everything that is said and to hold on to what is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. As the culture around us becomes more confusing and divisive, it can be difficult to discern what is true, what is false, what is good, and what is evil. And at Real Talk, Real Truth, our goal is to try to just educate ourselves, learn from each other, allow opportunities for conversation with real people who have knowledge on certain subjects that can help us to understand how we can discern truth. And we have a definite expert on that today who we'll introduce in just a moment. So we all know that there have been a lot of stories going around about the election being stolen, right? This has been going on for a very long time. Let me see here, I'm on the wrong screen. And I went through and I pulled off some, I'm sorry, I can't find it to share. I'm just going to tell you. I went through and I found some examples of some of the conspiracy theories that went around over the past 8 months. And here's just one example that I pulled. I just want to use this as an example that we can't believe everything we read on Facebook, right? Basically, the claim was, it was from an article from a bona fide magazine saying that up to 35,000 votes in Georgia may have been illegal. And the reason they may have been illegal was because people had moved, they had changed addresses, and they hadn't proven that they had used the right county when they voted. And if they voted in the wrong county, their vote should have been thrown out. Well, first of all, it stated that up to 35,000 may have been illegal. Those are important words. There were only about 11,000 that actually were. And they were saying, well, 12,000 votes is how much the election was lost by that Donald Trump lost by 12,000. And if there were 11,000 illegal votes, then that could have made a difference. I asked my brother, who is a software engineer, math genius, his name is Matthew Crumley. He did a little tweaking on the computer to figure out mathematically what is the likelihood that would have changed the election. The likelihood that those 11,000 or even 35,000 votes would have changed an election that was lost by 12,000 is less than 1%. Less than 1% chance that would have changed the outcome of the election. And so the author of the article is saying, well, they didn't even research this. They didn't even count that when they did the audit. The reason they didn't count it was because they had people on their staff who know math, and they did the math and they realized it wasn't going to make a difference. And so much fear that comes out because of a lack of research, a lack of study, lack of finding out the facts for ourselves has caused a lot of misunderstanding in our culture. And did you want me to pull up your?
Yeah, if you can find those pictures real quick. Well, let me just start by saying, does anybody ever remember some of the conspiracy theories from back in the 70s? They were, don't worry about it.
Yeah, we had them in the gun.
Yeah. Anyway, some of you may remember some of the pictures and visuals you may have seen. Anybody remember the Bigfoot conspiracy theory?
Mm-hmm.
They were remember the picture of Bigfoot? It was a grainy black and white picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right, it showed you the picture first, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Or let's take the Loch Ness monster, with his little head. Grainy picture, and look at, and if you look back here, you can see the scales, and we know it's down there, and they'd have whole episodes and shows trying to prove the existence of Bigfoot and prove the existence of the Loch Ness monster. Right?
But there are pictures that prove it.
But there were pictures that proved it. It reminded me of, I don't know if it ran on, I think it ran on all the news networks, but anyway, they showed a picture in Georgia, in Fulton County, of a suitcase under a table, and they showed the person put it under. Well, it must mean something, right? It must mean there's Bigfoot. It must mean there's a Loch Ness monster. No, the truth was that it was a ballot. What was it called? It was a ballot
case that was intended to be.
And they would and they put them under there, so when they come in, that was the truth. So when they come in the morning. But you see how conspiracy theories thought. They can give you a visual, and once you get that visual, whoever takes the story off leads your mind to think something that it's not.
Yeah.
And the whole point of what we're trying to do here today, and John's going to go into that. And how do we find truth? How do we stop? Something like this. And I'm going to ask you, John, before you start talking. I was thinking today. You ever watch a baseball player, when he misses the ball and he looks at a hole in his glove automatically? Oh, it must have been the glove. No, it was you. You missed the ball. Or you ever lose something and I know I have, or on my machines at work, we're working on something, and if the part comes out wrong, who changed my numbers? Who changed? Wait a minute, I did it. But our automatic, I think our automatic thing, when something doesn't go our way, we want to blame something else. And if somebody takes that narrative and takes off with it, they can take us on a rabbit trail that just, it just goes beyond. But it's natural in us, I think. So anyway.
Yeah. And so one thing real quick before you get into it, I remember, John, last week you had said something that's so wise, because we just gave 2 examples of theories about the election being stolen that you can prove to be false, right? But like John said last week, for every 2, 3, 4 that you can prove false, 100 more pop up. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You can't possibly debunk every possible theory that someone puts your way because they come up so fast. And so the key that John taught us last week is learning how to tell whether something is true based on different factors. So, Julie, if you want to go ahead and take it from there and get into this conversation of how to discern truth.
Good, thank you. Could I throw in a comment here? Because we were talking about conspiracy theories. An idea that I would like people, or a thought that I would like people to take away when it comes to conspiracy theories is this. Think of any major event in the last 10 or 20 years. Pretty much any major or crucial event that has taken place in the country, that's taken place in our history, you can find a conspiracy theory for.
Exactly.
JFK.
The moon landing.
JFK, the moon landing.
9/11.
9/11.
You go on and on.
That is how easy it is to come up with conspiracy theories. Now, even if you have a tendency to believe in conspiracy theories, you probably would get the sense that it can't all be a grand conspiracy.
Yeah.
We like to believe in conspiracy theories, partly because we like for there to be an explanation that's something more than just random chance. We like to be able to attribute an event to an actor who made this thing happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, it's just random chance. And a lot of the time when there was an actor who made something happen, like 9/11, it was actually the obvious person who, seemed to be the obvious people who made it happen. It was actually the people from Al-Qaeda who hijacked the airplanes and flew them into the World Trade Center.
Yeah, you can believe your eyes. We saw it happen. Yeah.
We saw it on TV.
Any major thing that happens, whether it's COVID or the election, or like we mentioned, 9/11, and we could go on and think about other major events.
Yeah.
It is very, very difficult to find a major event in history that somebody is not pushing a conspiracy theory about. And which brings us back to a point which I think maybe we made last week, which is, in fact, I'm sure we made it, which is that there are people out there pushing conspiracy theories, and they're pushing conspiracy theories because it benefits them to do so, either financially or in fame or in power or some other way. But most of the time, there is some pathway for them to benefit financially, and they're taking advantage of your natural inclination to want to attribute this major event to someone who made it happen.
Well, yeah, kind of like with the election being stolen, we don't like the results that came out of it. So there must be a reason that it didn't come out the way we wanted it to come out.
Exactly.
They're just, instead of just accepting that, I don't always get my way. Yeah, I have to find someone to blame. It feels better to blame somebody. Yeah.
And I think the fact that there've been so many Christians who have said, if it doesn't come out my way, I'm gonna believe in this conspiracy theory to fit my worldview, is a very serious problem in the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we have to accept the reality that Christians should not always be seeking to get our way. It should be the exact opposite.
Right.
So
I think that the latest conspiracy theory is January 6th. It wasn't
Yeah, it was
It was
Antifa.
Antifa.
There's another major event. Oh, it wasn't the obvious
Right.
people who did it. It was
People holding Jesus signs. It wasn't that. Yeah.
It was somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because it feels better. It feels better to blame your enemy than it does to admit that your own side is not as perfect as you want them to be.
Oh,
Exactly.
Yep. So true.
All right. So during our last discussion, during the last interview with Mr. Woodman, I asked him several questions and he talked about the big lie. And so we're finishing that interview tonight. I'm going to ask him 2 more questions. By the way, I'm Julie Nichols. If you don't know who I am, I guess I'm a co-host. The host of the show are Ron and Cindy Hawthorne, and I'm a co-host. But I'm going to ask him the other 2 questions. And the question number 3 is, what are some fact-based proofs to show that the big lie was not true, that the election was not stolen?
That's one of the questions that we actually went over last week.
We did? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't think we did number 3.
Yeah, well, we swapped 2 and 3. We did
Oh,
them
that's
in-
right. So
in a
I
different-
apologize. I should have remembered that. Sorry about that.
All right.
So I'll go back to number 2, and then when we finish number 2, I'll go to number 4. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. So why are people believing in, both on a superficial level and also on a deeper psychological level, about the big lie?
Okay, so I think there are lots of reasons why we believe falsehood,
Okay.
and we believe these false things that people are telling us. And we touched on one of those things already. People will say something, and it's something we would like to believe because maybe it makes sort of our side or our team look better. But there are lots of reasons. I think one of the reasons is most of us aren't really paying that much attention because, frankly, we don't have the time to, most of us, to try and sort through everything as much as we would really need to in order to find out the truth.
Yeah.
We have lives to live, and sometimes we haven't even really been taught the skills that we need to sort through falsehood from truth. And that's one of the things that I'm working on trying to do, to teach people more skills. We talked about people going and doing their own research. Well, that can be useful, but it can also lead people astray because a lot of us don't have the skills that we need. And, a lot of us think that going and doing our research means going and listening to somebody's video on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if we find a video on YouTube that says what we want to hear, okay, well, then that's the answer.
And I researched it.
Now,
Yeah.
now, do you think that too, just to touch on what you're talking about right there, that, and it's something I've experienced. Now, our internet and it knows who we are. It adapts to who we are. And I think part of that too is it keeps us in that loop, in the same loop. So it's going to send us naturally to people who we already agree with, or it's not going to give us that other, other reasoning, that other answer to what we're looking for. It's not going to give us the other side.
Right.
There is some of that, but a lot of what I see is people continuing to go back to the same sources. And it's often the sources that are telling us stories that align with what we already believe. And I've been guilty of this. Probably all of you have been guilty of this. I spent 30 plus years of my adult life being ideologically driven politically. And so I would go out and I would listen to the people who shared the same ideology that I had chosen to adopt. And I never went out and sought out people who disagreed with the things that I already believed. And so you can find the people who are telling you what you already believe, and it's like, well, yeah, there it goes. I'm right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. It really is.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna before I ask question number 4, When I worked on my graduate degree, I got my graduate degree between 2007 to 2009. And I was telling John Woodman that that's where I blossomed as a student. I was a pretty average student in high school and even in college, but I blossomed as a graduate student. And one of the things that really caught my interest was them teaching us how to find true, factual, statistical, data-driven information. And you have to go to the actual journals, the actual medical journals, the actual statistical journal from the top most respected, most reliable resources that there is to find the actual truth. Going to Wikipedia and going to sources that lean hard to the right or hard to the left are not going to be reliable sources, but actually go to the true data. And a good example of that is something that Mr. Woodman shared with me about the abortion rates and funding to Planned Parenthood. That data was one of the top sources of statistical data on that is from the Centers for Disease Control, CDC. And it showed the actual drops in abortion over a period of decades and how much it dropped under each president and so on and so forth. And that is how you find the truth. Is that correct, Mr. Woodman? Is that, I don't know if that's too generalized of a statement, but am I correct?
Well, I think one of the principles for finding the truth is try and find the most authoritative and knowledgeable sources you can find.
Yes.
Particularly who don't have an axe to grind.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I tune into, you mentioned one source of good information when it comes to questions of science and those types of questions, which would be good for COVID and climate change and all these kinds of things. You want to go to the people who know the most about that subject.
Yes.
And find out what those people think.
Yeah. And can I just, oh, sorry.
When it comes to things that are more policy oriented, I tend to look at think tanks because think tanks look into those kind of questions. But guess what? There are also think tanks that are very ideologically driven.
Mm-hmm.
And they exist on the left and they exist on the right as well.
Yes.
And so what I do is I tend to not pay that much attention. Like on the left, you have Center for American Progress. They're kind of ideologically driven. On the right, you've got American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation. And you can go to the websites of these organizations and they will tell you up front, hey, we have a specific purpose. Our purpose is to basically do and present research that, that supports this idea of free enterprise or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they are based on an ideology.
Right.
Now, they also get funded according to that ideology.
Yeah.
Can I throw in a question for you then on that line?
What's that?
Can I throw in a question about this? And I already know what you're going to say, but I just love to hear your take on it.
Okay, throw it in.
You've said that, you get information from the people who are the most authoritative, who don't have an axe to grind. I totally agree. So in the case of the question, was the election stolen or not? Who would you say has the most authority to answer that question with the least axe to grind? Who do you think we should trust when it comes to getting information on that question?
Well, we should trust all the people that we talked about in the last episode, which are the state election officials.
Bingo.
There you go.
And the people in, the people we talked about in the last session, we talked about state election officials, the state officials in states whose job it is to investigate election irregularities. We talked about the judges whose career it is to look at evidence and evaluate whether that evidence is good evidence or bad evidence, whether it's factual or just complete garbage.
Mhm.
We should listen to our FBI, who are professional investigators. We should listen to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, whose professional job it is to know about those types of attacks. We should listen to our own, we should probably listen to our own Department of Justice. And in fact, every single one of those, including a lot of people who were from both sides, and including a lot of judges who were appointed by Republicans, and quite a few judges that were appointed by Donald Trump himself, and the verdict of all those people who were the best authorities to judge truth, the unanimous verdict of every single one of them was that there was absolutely nothing to the claims that the election had widespread fraud or was rigged against Donald Trump in any way.
So if I understand what you're saying that those people are more reliable than the meme that my neighbor's sister's cousin put on Facebook?
Exactly.
Well, I
Wow.
haven't seen
That
the
is
meme that
amazing.
I haven't seen the meme that your cousin's sister's
I just made that up.
sister's
Yeah, thank you.
husband put
Good
on
answer.
Facebook, but I would tend to suspect that they might be.
Maybe.
Especially given, that they came from both sides of the aisle,
Yes.
and they were unanimous in their verdict.
Yes. Excellent.
Yep,
Great answer.
that's excellent. Yep.
So just briefly back to the think tanks. There are a couple of major think tanks that I tend to look to and listen to a lot more than the think tanks that are on the left or the right. There's one called RAND Corporation. It was originally established for defense purposes, but they are very, very clear that their whole ethos is to really try and get the facts straight and really be not ideologically driven. And there's also the Brookings Institution.
Yes.
Which is another good source of information. Now, you may find some people who are a bit more ideological one way or the other in the Brookings Institution, at least a little bit, not like the people who are working for the ideological think tanks. So there can always be a little bit of ideology or a little bit of bias in anybody's thought or presentation, but generally speaking, they don't really have a left-right axe to grind. And those two think tanks are among the best.
Sometimes you can catch those talks by those on C-SPAN. I think I've seen talks by the Brookings Institute on C-SPAN before, and Heritage Foundation too, obviously, which it swings right. But they're out there. They are definitely accessible.
If you look at the funding for and who organized some of the ideological think tanks, I mean, it becomes really clear that a lot of the ideologically driven think tanks, they may not be serving you, they may not be serving the public interest.
Right.
They're serving a particular ideology. They're pushing a particular ideology.
So let's say one of the think tanks is sponsored by, let's say, the Koch brothers, who are an oil industry.
Well, I didn't want to mention the Koch brothers, but you broke that open. Yeah, and they sponsor some of those.
Right, but they are obviously big into carbonate, their gasoline, oil. So they're probably not one I would probably want to listen to if I wanted to get the truth on whether climate change was real or not.
The Koch brothers, in fact, are well known for having sponsored over decades think tank type voices that have pushed an agenda that coincidentally, for some reason, seems to be aligned with them not having to worry about any kind of regulation that might cut into their personal profits.
Exactly.
Which have run into the, I mean, last I heard it was like $150 billion that they had.
And there's so much wisdom in that. And what you say is so much common sense, yet it's like you said, because people want to believe certain things. Obviously the last person you should trust to tell you information is somebody with an agenda to hide information from you or to push a certain side. No, you want information about the chicken coop. Don't ask the fox. Like it seems so obvious, yet it's so
But it's
easily
hard.
overlooked because we are biased ourselves.
We're
We
not
are.
only biased, but just like John, you made a great point. We go to work, we have lives, we have kids, we have soccer practice, we go to church or whatever it is we do. We're busy, and it's hard for us to really be able to look into things like that. You know, me, I have because I'm a nerd, but you know, a lot of people don't have that time, like you said.
And we tend to pick somebody who we think we can trust,
Right.
and then we listen to that person,
Right.
whether it's a talk show host or a pastor or a particular politician or whoever it is.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would encourage people to do is put some work into considering who to trust.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Yeah, because if you're trusting someone who's actually a fountain of truth, then you're going to get truth. If you're trusting someone who's a fountain of lies and poison and falsehood, then that's what you're going to get. And then another thing you'll hear me saying again and again is if you can determine that someone is consistently or blatantly feeding you falsehood or misinformation, that's a poison well. Stop drinking from the poison well.
Yeah.
And there's a proverb on that about drinking from the cistern. Or no, wait, that's about marriage.
Yeah.
That's the wrong one. No, there was a verse. I had just seen a proverb today. I read Proverbs every day that it said something to that effect. It'll come to me.
Yeah, there's a lot in Proverbs about truth, you know, about the value of truth and about the importance of verifying for yourself. I think the one you have open is
I
about
think I
that.
got one right here where it says, it's in Proverbs 17:4.
Yeah.
It says, an evildoer listens to wicked lips, a pays attention to a destructive
There you
tongue.
go.
Yeah.
If you listen.
That's Proverbs is full of wisdom. It's a book of wisdom.
It is. And, you know, for me, as I've grown in my faith, and as I don't depend on it, just for me personally, I can listen to people talk, like John was saying, somebody's spewing out lies, or I go to the Book of Proverbs, and that's what's really grew my faith. It wasn't because I watch Fox News or I watch CNN or I watch, that helps me. I can watch what goes on around me, listen to what's coming out of somebody's mouth, and I'll come up with a proverb and say, nope, I don't have to depend on my news organizations because I personally depend on the Bible, and I can usually discern, you know, I mean, I know whether they're being totally honest, but you can.
Well, if something is in stark contrast to basic Christian morality, like the telling the truth,
Yes.
and just being and not bearing false witness against our neighbor.
Yes.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things. I mean, if people would just remember the 10 Commandments when they're listening and repeating information, it would change the world. It really would.
Or he who mocks the poor, how does that verse go? He who mocks the poor, basically what that proverb is saying, if you're putting people down who are under you, when you're mocking handicapped people, ding ding.
I know.
Ding, ding,
I mean,
ding,
when
ding.
when
But
Donald,
we gotta get back to the topic.
that's
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. We have, sorry.
I'm going to
but
ask number 4. Would you
I'm
like for me to ask number 4?
yeah, if you don't mind, real quick, because Ren found this article today that really pertains to what we're talking about.
Okay.
I want to read a little excerpt from it. It's from the Herald banner, which he found on the website. I'm not sure. It's written by a pastor. The article is written by a pastor. It's referring to the passage in scripture that teaches us where Jesus said Christians are supposed to be as wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves, right?
Because they're ravenous wolves out
Right,
there.
right. And he says, it's very interesting. It says, sharing conspiracy theories as truth breaks both Christ's call to be wise as serpents and to be innocent as doves. We are called to be wise. The Bereans were commended in the book of Acts because they didn't take what Paul said at face value. They went home and compared what he said with what scripture said. Our Christian witness to the world is damaged when people see us sharing insincerity, conspiracy theories easily disproven with truth and common sense. And then he continues on. He says, we are called to be innocent. Sharing these unfounded conspiracies as truth is not a morally neutral act. In the same way that gossiping isn't morally neutral. Gossip is sinful. What are conspiracy theories but gossip to the next degree? As Christians, we should play no part in spreading gossip and lies. And so much truth there. Like, we know not to spread gossip about other people, but yet somehow sharing conspiracy theories, people miss that that's the same thing. We just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never forget Reverend Jim Wallace, which is, I'm not sure, I think I've introduced him to you. John knows who he is.
Oh yeah, I know.
He basically said to be a Christian is more than our stance on abortion and same-sex marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more to being a Christian than two politically weaponized hot-button issues.
Yes. And truth is right up there. Jesus said, I am
Yes,
the way, the
exactly.
truth, and the life. But truth is really
Exactly.
important to God.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we throw out all other moral precepts in the name of fruitlessly squashing those two issues.
Mhm.
Right, because what happens there is when you glorify the issue, you're no longer glorifying Jesus.
Yes.
Exactly.
Jesus goes down
Mhm.
here, the issue goes up here. It's no longer about Jesus anymore. Now it's about an issue
Yep.
or something else. And
Mhm.
the balance gets all out of whack.
Mhm.
You gotta,
It turns into idolatry.
there you go.
Absolutely.
Okay, question 4.
Question 4. No, you're correct. Okay, number 4. What should regular Christians as well as spiritual leaders be doing to prevent the further spread of this and other similar lies? Ooh, I've got an example, but go ahead, Mr. Woodman.
The loaded one.
Uh-oh.
Well, we were just first of all, I would say learn to discern the truth for yourself.
Mhm.
But before talking very much about that, we were just talking about passing on things that are conspiracy theories.
Mhm.
It seems to me that Christians are supposed to be people of truth.
Mhm.
And one of the 10 commandments was, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Basically, you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't pass on falsehood. So it seems to me that we have a responsibility not to just pass on things unless we can sort of certify those things as being true
Yes.
for the most part. And the way that we do that is we don't just grab something and pass it on to somebody else.
Mhm.
We look into it and we fact check it and we investigate it to see if it's true. We ask, is it coming from a source who ought to be reliable, or is it coming from a completely random source who may or may not be telling us the truth?
Mhm.
Where there is no wood, there is no fire.
Yes,
Another
the fire goes out.
fire goes out. If you don't pass it on, it doesn't move on.
Yeah. And that is specifically talking about being a talebearer.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
So
All right.
back on knowing the truth for ourselves. I think we also have if not a responsibility, it ought to really be desirable for us to be able to figure out how to know the truth for ourselves, because the more in touch we are with the truth, number one, the smarter we are.
Yes.
And it just seems to me that things are likely to go better, both at an individual level and at a collective level, if we are in touch with reality, which is based on the truth.
Yes.
I actually have a course that I've been working on. Now been working on it for the last 5.5 years. And the course started about 5.5 years ago when I asked the question and decided to get serious in trying to find an answer to the question.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, we lost you, Jerry.
What's wrong with America? Did you lose me? Am I still here?
Yeah,
Just for a second.
So start all back over at when you said I asked the question.
Okay.
That's where
So I decided to get serious about trying to find an answer to the question, what's wrong with America and how do we fix it?
Wow.
And then I spent the next 5 years trying to figure out the answers to those questions. And then I spent about half a year beyond that trying to articulate what the answers to those questions are. And the end result is a course. The course is called How We Fix America. And just sort of the shameless plug here, I have a little website at howwefixamerica.com.
Okay.
How we fix it.
We'll put that on the Facebook
Yes.
page.
What's that?
We'll put that on our Facebook page so people can find it
I think,
after we get off.
but part of the answer is that we need to be in touch with truth.
Yes.
And so out of 13 lessons in the course, 2 of those lessons are on how we can know the truth and how we can basically, well, really on how we can know the truth so that we can be passing on the truth and reality to other people. And one of those lessons has 7 rules for knowing the truth. And maybe I can just name those rules very briefly, not go into them in detail, but I'll just name them very briefly for you. Rule number 1, love wisdom and the truth.
Oh, I love that. Love wisdom. Yes.
You're not likely, people talk about attracting things into your lives. You're not likely to attract the truth into your life if you're not interested in the truth, if you don't care about the truth. And you're not really that likely to attract wisdom into your life unless you're interested in wisdom. You know, you've got to welcome it. Rule number 2, listen carefully and objectively to both sides.
Yes.
A little earlier, we talked about a verse in Proverbs. Here's another verse from Proverbs. The first person to present his case seems right until someone else steps forward and questions him.
Yes.
That's in Proverbs 18. Also in Proverbs 18 is another verse. Whoever answers before listening is acting foolishly and brings disgrace upon himself. And I've seen a lot of people answering without listening. And you know what? I've been guilty of it myself. I've been guilty of it a lot of times. We don't really want to listen. We want to prove our own point, our own position. But you can't really know the truth unless you're willing to listen carefully and openly to both sides. Because you know what? You might just be wrong. Rule number 3, we already sort of touched upon, which is fact check every important thing that you hear. And guess who you ought to fact check the most?
Yourself.
Well, you ought to fact check yourself, but
People you agree with.
the people you agree with are the people who are going to lead you astray.
So
You know,
true.
think of the person that you hate the most. You know, just imagine this person, politician or whoever. Now, are you going to let that person come up to you and lead you astray with some nonsense, some lie? Probably not. It's the people you like and the people you admire and the people you trust who are most likely to lead you astray.
That is
Yeah,
so
it is.
powerful.
It is.
That is so wise.
It is very powerful, and it's powerful because that's happened in our lives. That's why, and in Julie too, where we left a certain church because because we could see that we were being led. And I don't think it was deliberately.
No,
not deliberate.
Just a different perspective on
Different
things.
beliefs that they didn't jive. Man, that was good.
And you know what? Sometimes they can be very nice people.
Right. And they mean well, and they're speaking the truth as they see it, but that doesn't mean they're always right. And this tendency to assume that the people we trust are right. Just if I could give an example before we move on to the next one.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and name the person because it's a public figure. Okay. I don't name a lot of names, but in this case, I'm going to name him. We got into some discussions on Facebook around the election time with some Trump supporters who were Christians. And the one name that this one person kept dropping, well, Franklin Graham says so. Franklin Graham says. And I kept trying to say to this person, Franklin Graham is not Jesus. Franklin Graham, but it was that thing where his Franklin Graham, his dad was Billy Graham. He wouldn't lead me astray. Well, he's human. So yeah, and we're all susceptible to that. I know every human is susceptible to that. It happens. For sure.
People may be nice people. They may be well-intentioned people, but they may still be massively leading you astray because they may have their thinking all messed up.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's good. That's a good one.
So rule number 4, get your information from a variety of factual, less biased, more trustworthy sources. And we already touched on that.
Yeah.
Look for the people who ought to be the people, you know, who know what they're talking about. If my dog is sick, you know, our car mechanic is really good when it comes to cars. He knows his stuff. That's one of the reasons we take our car to him. But if my dog is sick,
Mhm.
I'm not going to take the dog to the car mechanic.
Right.
I'm going to take the dog to the veterinarian.
That's
Very
so
good.
true.
And
So much wisdom.
That's good.
and I'm not actually going to I'm not actually going to ask the veterinarian to look at my car,
Right.
That's so,
because
yeah.
he's not the person who's the most authoritative on that particular issue.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
This is
it's so much
common
like,
sense.
So if my
you're gonna know what you're
pastor,
gonna say.
if my pastor tells me don't get the shot because we don't believe in science, he's probably not the
Yeah,
one.
and our
actually-
pastor's not
No,
doing it, to clarify.
well, yeah,
but
to
there
clarify,
our
we're in a
pastor is
very good church
Yeah.
who took the virus very seriously and followed the CDC guidelines all the way. Bless his soul. That is just
Yeah, we've been very appreciative.
That's
But
the way
yeah,
it should be.
Pastor's not the one to ask, hey, pastor, do you think that, ask your doctor. Like,
I
yeah,
think
so wise.
I think too, a mark of a true Christian is someone who is willing to say, I am not the expert
Yes.
on this.
go.
I am going to look to people who collectively say,
Mhm.
that this is true. And I gave you, before we got on that, if you don't mind, I'm going to give an example that I gave to Ron and Cindy and John before we got on. And I have a son with Parkinson's. I mean, I have a son with autism and I have early onset Parkinson's disease. And when we were seeking treatments for both conditions as a family, we looked to the top experts on autism and the top experts on Parkinson's collectively. And what they said is a majority on these particular conditions. And we went with what they said and it reaped fruit. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that and seeking about the truth about other things. Look to the top experts in those fields as the authority on various matters.
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, sometimes you can get truth from other people,
Yeah.
but it usually happens more if those people are looking to the most authoritative experts. Now, it can be hard to know whether that's happening or not, but I think, again, it comes back to, you know, test what people tell you and go with the most authoritative information. Rule number 5, make it your ongoing goal to weed out falsehood and your own false beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's an assumption in there. The assumption is that you may believe some things that are not quite right. A lot of us maybe have not accepted that proposition, but I think it's a proposition that we need to accept.
Right.
All of us have been led astray on various things. And I can tell you, as somebody who, you know, I listened to what I thought was the right source of information, and I thought I understood all of the political issues. When I started really delving into such things as political issues and controversial questions, and going by some of the other rules, such as listening carefully and openly to both sides, and not just listening to the talking heads on the radio or on TV, but going and asking the question, okay, on climate change, what do the people who actually do the climate research, what do those people think? As I started going through that process, I began to realize that just about every area that I confronted and that I thought more deeply about than I'd ever thought about before, I found things that I was wrong about.
Yeah, and I think that, our pastor did a sermon this weekend, and he talked about we can't always trust our experience.
Mhm.
It has to be based on truth,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
It's
Our
all
experience,
based on truth.
Experience may be
Right.
real, but that doesn't mean you're seeing it through the lens of truth.
right?
We have to be able to admit that we're wrong.
Yes.
We
We
do.
have to be able to say, okay, am I correct about this or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if we see the truth and we have enough information from the most reliable sources to say this is the truth, we need to be willing to say, I was wrong, and admit that we're wrong. And that's what I am seeing a lot in fundamentalist circles. They refuse to acknowledge the fact that they might be wrong about something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They think they're the
There's-
experts in everything.
Right.
There is some cost to being wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some emotional cost to admitting that you were wrong. But
Mhm.
you know what? You pay the cost and you get the reward.
You get the freedom.
Yes.
And sometimes the reward is freedom, like we talked about in our first session. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Exactly.
Another part of the reward is you actually get smarter.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's sort of like getting a new car. You go on the game shows, and certainly when I was growing up, there were all these game shows, and the big prize, if they would pull back the curtain and they'd say, and you won a new car. And that was the big prize. Now, the problem is that you only have a one-car garage. And in order to fit your new car in, you probably need to trade in the used car.
Mhm.
And your old wrong belief, you need to take that used wrong junker of a belief and trade up to a belief that's actually true.
Romans 12,
That's good.
Romans 12:2, the renewing of your mind.
Renewing your mind. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you actually are renewing your mind, and you're renewing your mind with truth.
Yes.
And,
Right.
and you are upgrading. You are trading up.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So that rule, make it your ongoing goal to weed out falsehood and your own false beliefs. And we all have them. I've had so many of them, I couldn't even list them. Trade up.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Rule number 6, we already touched on. Stop drinking from poison wells.
Yep.
Start testing the quality of what you're drinking, and start drinking from wells that provide the truth instead of wells that provide falsehood and poison. And then rule number 7 is keep your eyes open for fallacies and propaganda techniques and your own biases.
Mm-hmm.
And then where I go in the course from this is actually the next lesson. We talk about a couple dozen different fallacies and propaganda techniques that people can use to fool us, which we won't get into here. But just rule number 7, keep your eye open for fallacies.
Yes. Probably not.
Yeah. Okay, John, that was great. I want to put that on there. If you run that course, let me know.
Yes.
I want to get in on that. When you run it online.
I took the course. Now I confess that I wasn't there for every full session because I wasn't able to be, but I do have the book. And I mean, John is a brilliant man. I mean, he has
So much wisdom. We've learned so
Run
much.
in on that.
so much wisdom. He
Run it
has,
again, let us know.
yeah, he has invested so much time and energy into seeking the truth and
That's
to
amazing.
seeking the actual facts about things.
Okay.
And
We're gonna hang on before you admit. We're gonna go ahead and before we go any further, we're running out of time here, and we're gonna admit somebody here. We brought a special guest on today,
okay.
and we talked about it earlier, which really goes into everything that we just talked about. And we want to bring her on, and she's coming on right now. This happens to be
And
Cindy's mom,
Our mother,
my
Linda
mother-in-law.
Crowley.
Hi.
Looks
And
like she's muted. She's getting her.
she'll get it
camera
together there in a minute.
was
Yes, John, I
ready.
want, when you do that again, let me know. When you run that course, I really,
Yeah,
really
we'll
enjoy
post links to, I know, so people, so our listeners
yeah. And other
can find
people,
you, because there's so much,
We will sign you up.
yes,
all right.
so much wisdom in there.
Yeah.
I will say, speaking for myself, and I know speaking for my husband too, we learned so much from you just having you.
Oh, yeah.
Gained so much wisdom from you. Not, it goes deeper than just, was the election stolen or not? It goes into how do you know? Because there's always, like you said, there's always going to be some other thing. There's always going to be a new conspiracy theory. There's always going to be, you know, you've learned so much.
Okay.
Mom, we
That's why I brought him on. He's an expert.
There's always going to be a new conspiracy theory. There's always going to be, you know, learned so much. Mom, I think you might have us on in the background. Can you turn us off in your background so we're not hearing ourselves again?
I'm not sure what's happening.
Mom, I think you might have us on in the background. Mom, I think you have us playing on a separate device maybe. And we're hearing ourselves echoed back.
Yeah, while she's trying to get on, John, what do you think about this? I think one of the things that they use, the propaganda tricks they use to trick us is we have that contact bias where if we see somebody in an important suit, or take a TV commercial where they show a person in a doctor's suit and they're trying to sell a certain medication, right? Well, that doctor looks, or that person in that commercial looks like a real doctor, but really that doctor is an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So now move that over to YouTube, and I think we see the same thing where we have that contact bias. We see him, the background looks all professional, everything looks. We're more. They fool us and pull us into believing it. It's a propaganda tool. What do you think about that?
Well, sometimes anyone who wants to deceive us is going to try and look credible. And unfortunately, there are actually people out there who have credentials that would seem to be relevant. There are people with real PhDs. There are people with real medical degrees who are spreading misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Another rule is if extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Yes.
So if somebody is saying something that goes completely against what you might call the conventional wisdom, you really need extraordinary proof to believe that. They need to present extraordinary proof. But yeah, people will present themselves in a way to produce confidence in us that what they're saying is true. And that, in fact, is the origin of the whole phrase con man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A con man is a confidence man.
Oh yeah.
He is someone who creates an aura of confidence that inspires confidence in him. So a confidence man will speak in terms of black and white. He will say, this is absolutely, assuredly the way it is. I am the authority on this. And it's absolutely this way. And he will use various techniques to inspire confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, or kind of like when you see a president, stand in front of Mount Rushmore, stick his chest out, look, or behind a bunch of flags, that confidence, to show that confidence. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Now, just because somebody, again, it's not always a hard and fast rule. Just because somebody is doing something that will inspire confidence does not necessarily mean that they're lying to you.
Right.
Right.
So again, you have to go back to the fundamental principle of testing what they're saying.
Yeah.
And even if you want to believe it, especially if you want to believe it,
Yes.
if you find out that they're feeding you nonsense and falsehood again and again, you got to stop listening to them. You got to stop drinking from the poison well.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'll be brief because my mom is on now. But when you said, especially if you want to believe it, I think the more we like, the more we like what we're hearing, the more important it becomes to test it. Right. If something sounds great to us, that's the time when you should be the most determined to double check and make sure, because that's when we're the most easily deceived.
Isn't that what our parents taught us when we were young? If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
Liars will suck you in by
Yes.
telling you things you want to hear.
For sure.
Okay. All right. today, okay, we have on, hello, Mom.
Hi.
And
Hello.
we
Glad you
brought
made
you on today because, you know, what we're talking about, conspiracy theories and all these things. And right now
Finding
we know
truth.
finding truth. And you've got a little bit of experience in that because you've been on a journey yourself. You're currently seeking, you know, the vaccination. You're not vaccinated right now because you have certain, you know, allergies and this and that. And you've got a little bit of some experience in that. And can you kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and some things maybe you might have watched and then you went back and checked again, and how you went about finding out if this was good for you or not? How did you fact check what you did?
Yeah, okay. And the truth is, I'm not quite finished with this journey yet, but I feel like I'm making some more strides again. The allergies, yes, that's what drove my reluctance to get the vaccine. So when I say allergies, it's a lot of allergies. It's not seasonal stuff. It's a lot of chemicals and anything that I consume or allow to be absorbed through my skin impacts me. So as soon as, you know, I'm also, to add to that, I'm in the vulnerable category by age and by health issues. The weakest point in my body is my respiratory system. So there's just a lot of reason to not want to get COVID, a lot of reason to be really careful about the vaccination. And so I started a journey of investigating what's in the vaccine. And I don't mean the list of things, general things like lipids and salts and sugars, because I need really specific information. I'm allergic to a lot of those. And some of those are pretty serious allergies. So I just like to say too, John, the things that you're saying in the last episode and this one ring so true to me in my journey. You get a lot of encouragement, and I say that kindly because honestly, I've had just a lot of people, not my own family, but a lot of people really pushing to not get the vaccination for what I would call conspiracy theories. And it has been a journey to deal with that. And it has not been a temptation to me to follow that guidance. But I think I have a little bit of stubbornness that says I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to do what I think is right for me. But how do I find it out? Is it like the actual actions that I took? Is that what you're wanting me to share?
Yeah, maybe, you know, we talked Sunday and you were talking about, you know, you watched a video and then you checked on the video.
Right.
And what you found out, you know, briefly, and then where you went for your information.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what mindset did you have, you know, carry with you and through that process too?
Yes. And that's one of the things, as I've been thinking about this today, that's one of the big things in my mind is that you have to approach this with a mindset that you're looking for truth and not looking for what I want the truth to be.
Right.
Looking for the truth and therefore not having expectations as to what it might be. Mm-hmm. Anyway, no axe to grind. I love that phrase today too. That really fits with the whole thing. So where did I go? I went to things. First of all, I just Googled the vaccines and ingredients. And in the earlier days, there wasn't much that seemed to be available to find very easily, except for the very generic categories of ingredients. So I just kept looking. It was a matter of try it again. A week later, maybe some information will be out there. And for several weeks, I kept trying it. I did go to the CDC right away, the authorities, the ones who I trust and I see as the highest experts. And their advice is clearly that if you have allergies to any of the ingredients, don't take the vaccine. But still, I needed the actual ingredients, not the categories of ingredients. So it took quite a while, but I finally came up with a list for Pfizer and Moderna. They're a little bit different. I couldn't find anything on Johnson & Johnson for a long time. And in both cases, I found an allergy, a very specific allergy. Doctor verified. So my thought at that point was just, I can't get the vaccination. So, and I know that a lot of people who are on the vaccination side would say, well, they keep you for 15 minutes and they watch you and they're prepared to deal with the allergic reactions. But again, the reactions I get are not that simple. Mm-hmm. One of the ingredients that's in the Pfizer is an ingredient that I inadvertently consumed when I was still in the process. It took me a good year to even get a good handle on what I'm allergic to. There are so many things. And I consumed one of those things about 6 months into it, not knowing that that was an allergy. I should have been in the hospital because all night long I wasn't breathing very well and wasn't even aware enough to realize. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to not go off on rabbit trails here, but that is one of the ingredients. So that was a moment that when I put those two things together, I finally found a list from the drug company. It's another source I went to, the drug companies themselves, definitely not any of the conspiracy theories and so-called experts that are obviously biased. Found that ingredient and was able to verify with some records I kept on my own health situation. So yeah, I knew I couldn't get that one. And the Moderna, I saw all kinds of ingredients that I didn't know what they were. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who has experienced a lot of difficulties with allergies and trying to find out what I can. So another thing I did is I considered a lot of what I'm allergic to has been drugs of any kind. I'm allergic to allergy medication. So what are you gonna do? You know?
Right.
So one of the allergy medications the doctor had put me on to try to combat some of the asthma I was getting from somewhere actually increased the asthma. Mm-hmm. So I looked at the ingredients and found one that I knew I was allergic to. Stopped taking that. Contact lens. I used to wear contact lenses. The cleaner and the wetting solution have a lot of chemicals in it. And I came to a point in life several years ago where I could not wear the contacts anymore because of the wetting solution. I was fine with the cleaner, but not the wetting solution. This is just knowledge from
years ago.
10 years ago, maybe. Yeah.
And if I could just interject, I feel like the pattern that you're developing here is that you have had to become your own advocate on a lot of these issues, and you've had to educate yourself
yes
on the details of your allergies because your allergies are complicated, right? And you've done that. You spent a lot of time researching into these allergies. So when you found that those allergens were in the shots, the Moderna and the Pfizer, right. I think it's so important for people to understand your reasoning was knowledge-based. It wasn't conspiracy-based.
Right.
You weren't one of those people who was saying, well, I think they put chips in there. They're trying to. You weren't
exactly.
Doing that. And so it's interesting that you can come to the same conclusion as other people, but for very different reasons, right? You may know other people who chose not to get the vaccine because they think it's the mark of the beast. Right. You know it's not the mark of the beast, but you getting your own information have come up with an important detail that was relevant to you and your situation, taking responsibility for your decision based on your knowledge of actual science. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to get to here today is getting personal information for yourself that applies to you and not allowing the noise of everybody else, the fear and the chaos to distract you from that mission to get the information.
And going to the authoritative sources to get
exactly.
Yeah. And she's not doing this, she's not having these hesitancies because of just refusal.
Right.
She's doing this because she has a very unique case. And that's
Right.
that the refusals are what I'm concerned about, is that people who are perfectly capable of getting the vaccine,
Right.
that's a completely different story.
Yeah. And I just thought that your story, Mom, was just so good, and it went just fit so with what John was talking about today.
Yeah.
And just other people hearing your story, hearing what you actually did to come to your conclusion may help somebody else who's on the fence that
About any issue, whether it's this or
who do I
something else.
listen to? Who do
Yeah.
I YouTube? You know, no, you exactly what you did and exactly the way John explained it is how we do this stuff, is how we have to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Go to the store, like John said, and like my mom said, go to the people who know what they're talking about and listen to them.
Yeah.
There's so much noise around us. You can listen to 1,000 people, but
Mhm.
999 of them don't know what they're talking about. So listen to the ones that do.
Yes.
Like John said, you're not going to go to your mechanic to ask for advice about a vaccine. You know,
Exactly.
not my best friend doesn't know about the vaccine. My doctor does. You know, the website you went to. That's
Yeah.
so much wisdom.
And I would add in my case, even thank you for putting my story into words, Cindy. Cindy always comes to my rescue. She knows, she always knows what I'm saying and puts it in concise words for me. But yeah, and I'm, like I said, I'm still on this journey because I have just this week come across information from the one medical source that's out there on the internet that I do listen to, who is a doctor who's he's so non-political and he doesn't have any agenda. I've been listening to him for 1.5 years, and I don't even know what his political stand is. And he shows signs of both sides. You know, if you go
It shouldn't matter.
Right.
yeah,
It does, unfortunately does, but it shouldn't.
Right.
yeah. And he not only goes with the science, he recognizes the truth that to me is so obvious,
Mhm.
is that the
Yeah.
science itself doesn't change, but our awareness of what the truth in science
Right.
can change, especially with something so new. And he follows that and he adjusts, and he's not afraid to say, I changed my mind about what I said before. Not
And
if
that's
you
okay.
bet you're wrong. And so I listened to him, and just this past week, listening to him, I came to the conclusion that maybe I need to check into the Johnson & Johnson again a little more thoroughly. And I'm not finished with that, because I did at one point find an ingredients list, and I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I don't know what those things mean. And because I have so many allergies that, and it's the chemicals that seem to be the really serious ones, it scared me. I'll just be honest, it scared me. And I thought, I don't know if I'm allergic to any of those, but having seen the other two, and that scares me. Once that shot's in, you can't take it out. So, but I got over that, that little bump in the road and decided I'm going to investigate this some more. So
Right.
I still haven't
You
decided.
gotta do.
It's okay, but your case is unique. Your case is unique. You know, you
Yeah.
have to, because you've had these previous reactions.
Mhm.
You're basing it on science, and there are unique cases in which people cannot get the vaccine, and people who can are doing it for those who cannot get it.
Yes.
For the sake who cannot get it.
Right.
So
And for
Okay.
that reason, I have to be careful. But if I could just say one more thing, as in the furthering of my investigation, I am going to go talk to my doctor.
Right.
Many people have said, "Have you asked your doctor?" And I feel like like you said, like you said, Julie, that my case is unique enough. My doctor is new enough to me. My doctors keep retiring. Same system, but different doctor. I feel like I need to present my case to her with some really specific information.
And you should.
Because I know this general census is, yes, get the vaccine. It's better than the risk of COVID. But I feel like these things need to really be considered.
Yeah.
If I do decide to get it, I will probably go stay with somebody, maybe you, Cindy, or maybe my sister, and get it and be with somebody near a hospital. I live kind of, some people say in the sticks.
Yeah, that would be wise.
But to be near a hospital and near someone else.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay. So, that was great. Yes.
Thank
Good.
you.
Doing research, and
Yes,
taking responsibility for your own truth,
yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
your knowledge.
Great
It's
talk.
nice to meet you, Mrs. Crumley. Nice to
Thank
meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. I feel a
I'm
little
Julie, by the way.
Yeah. And I've been watching you all right from the start here. This has really been great.
Oh, that's sweet.
Just through the previous one through 3 times so far, John, that what you're sharing is, there's just so much. But I've got notes here from today.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Color coded.
Oh, wow.
I do things. So
Awesome.
this is really great. I appreciate you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Thank you.
please send that to me through Messenger and I'll get it right onto the,
Yeah, we'll
page.
post a link to
and,
anything you've got.
and when you start the next one, I want to be in on that. Let me know.
Definitely.
Okay, and I'm gonna pray and we'll say good night. And thanks, everybody,
Good
for
night.
everything, and let me pray and we'll say good night.
Okay.
It was great tonight. Great
Very.
stuff. Dear God, thank you for a good night here, Father. Thank you for the wisdom and the knowledge and the insight that was shared here today, Father. I just ask that whoever you wish that this would touch and whoever you wish that this would be of help to, Father, that you just bless those with that, because I was definitely blessed tonight to hear it myself and I'm walking away a little wiser today, Father. I just thank you for John, Julie, and Cindy's mom and Cindy here today, to thank you for them to be able to sit down and have these tough discussions and just grow closer to you. Again, I just thank you, Father, for all that you do. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for being here, Miss Crumley. I really